All right, everyone, and what we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to be attaching all the bones and the joints together. Now, please bear in mind that it's not the goal to actually do the fixing or the skinning, it's just the goal to put the bones in place so that basically that we can go to the next step. So for this, first thing I would strongly recommend before anything else is make sure that you save this as a new file. So this says HumanIK ready. I'm going to call the next version of the file skinning1. Technically skinning01. Reason why is you always want a version that you know for a fact is going to work, waiting in the wings just in case something gets weird, because anything that can go wrong will go wrong, as always. So if you have a couple backups, it's keeping you safe. Now, if you need some examples of what some other people have done, because I'm going to be honest, what I do here might be a little bit different than what everyone else might be doing. So to that end, besides having the values for skinning over here, I've also uploaded some older versions of skinned characters that everyone here can look at should you want to. So for example, if you want to see how like a big bully character was skinned, or regular gentleman or lady have been skinned, I think I have both here, you're more than welcome to check them out so that you can take a look at how the skinning's done in those cases. Sorry about the beep. So let's take a look at how we can skin these up. So as I said before, I would strongly recommend doing the simpler ones first. And something that wouldn't be a bad idea if you can is actually going to have my HumanIK. There we are. Now you're going to be turning this on and off a lot. What I would say is you would turn it off for the skinning elements, and then when you're ready to save, turn it back on again. This is just a little bit of a safety precaution. As you saw before, we ran into a couple issues here and there, but hopefully doing this will avoid any issues in the future. So I'm going to turn this off. And my skeleton's still in place. Very good. What I'm going to do is, so I can see this a little bit easier, because it's a little hard for me to see my joints, is I'm going to go to display, I'm going to go to animation, and I'm going to go to joint size. I'm going to turn these way bigger so I could see them. So yeah, my eyes are a little bit easier to see now. The head's definitely easier to see, and that's what we want. So the first thing I'm going to skin is going to be the hair. I didn't do anything too complicated with this. I could always add some joints later on, but at least for now, I'm pretty happy with what I got. So yeah, so just to get started with this, I'm going to go to, I'm just going to see where my skin is and bring up the little settings box so I can have this at the ready. And I'm going to reset my settings just to get started, because again, when it comes to this, at least for my hair, I don't need to get complicated with it. I can just basically select my joint, make sure I just go to where it says joint hierarchy and go to select the joints you need to do that, at least for what we're doing here. And everything else can pretty much stay as is, because I'm only selecting one joint in this case. So here we are, select the hair, and then hit apply. Now if everything worked the way it's supposed to, my head should be able to turn around, and it seems like it's going just fine in these cases. I'm going to try and go to bind pose so it goes back to normal. That bind pose is going to save you a lot of trouble, but again, save often to be safe. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the eye. Basically select the eye first, the joint first, then just hitting Q, selecting the eye itself. Once again, with the default setting, minus the actual selected joint, hit apply for the bind skin. Move around the eye just to be safe. It seems to be working just fine. And again, I'm going to go to bind pose to put it in its default position. Now you have to be a little careful, because it could get a little bit strange when you do this. So do a quick test to see what you can rely on and what you might not be able to. So I'm hitting the Q, selecting the bone, then select the mesh, then hit apply. So now if I move this around, the eye goes with it. And again, if I want to, I could completely make my character into a bit of a derp face. But that's okay. All right, so selecting the mesh, go to bind pose, go to the mesh over here, go to bind pose. Oof. Seems like everything's working pretty good so far, knock on wood. Not sure if you actually heard that, but that was just my desk. Okay, so the simpler areas are done, so that's pretty cool. Can't guarantee that everything else is going to be quite that simple, though. Nevertheless, we have a good start. Now, what I would recommend doing first is the feet, since that tends to be the simplest one. Now, again, similar to what I was showed previously, when you're doing this kind of skinning, you have to select in a very specific order. But before we get to that order, what I'd like to do is I want to set up my settings for the actual skinning process. So, selected joints, we definitely want to do that. For the bind method, we're going to choose an option called geodesic voxel. It does a pretty good job with the whole skinning process here. For the skinning method, we're going to be using the dual quadrarian. And the max influences, this is basically how many joints are going to have an influence. I would put this, because again, we don't have like midway area like either the body or the arms, so you can actually keep this at 2, because that's basically, again, these areas are going to be changed by these 2 feet. These areas are going to be these areas are going to be connected to this foot, part of the foot, and this shin, and the rest of this area is going to be connected to this shin. So we don't need to get complicated with this. I'm going to switch that to 2. Fall off, again, 0.20 usually works pretty nicely. So yeah, we're pretty good. Now I haven't hit apply or bind skin yet because we're not ready yet, but I am going to select the toe first. And again, I'm holding shift when I do this. Then I'm actually selecting the foot joint, and then I'm selecting the shin. Now please bear in mind that again, my actual rig has been turned to none so that I can see the actual bones themselves. That part's important. If you don't do that and you try and actually skin on the controllers, this is not going to end well. But now that the controllers are turned off, I'm going to hit apply, and hopefully everything should be okay. Oh, you have to actually select the skin too. Now I'm going to hit apply. It'll take a second, but now if I was to rotate this back and rotate this back a little bit, ooh, that actually did a pretty good job. I'm pretty happy with that. Still could have some more stuff to do with this, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And again, if I go select the skin, that part's important. Go to bind pose, it puts it back to normal. That is awesome. And I'm going to do the same thing for the hips. Now I have to admit, the hips tend to be a little bit tricky because we need to make sure that we select only what's necessary. So first off, the legs, that part's pretty simple. Then the thighs, that's pretty simple. But here, for the shirt, because a lot of people are going to be in the same boat, you have to figure out exactly how far up you need to go. Now I'd recommend not just selecting the joint that's here, but also the actual rib area first. The reason why we're getting the first part of it, not the rib, but the spine first. The reason why we're doing that is there's some geometry that's really dug inside here. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to have some extra geometry like this area connected to this. Now if it ends up that we don't need it, we could always get rid of that at another time, but this is just to save us a little bit of hassle later. But once we selected the main thighs, that bit of the spine, because again, this area over here is going to be connected to the spine, we could select the main hips, then we should be able to select the actual legs themselves and hit apply. And again, it seems like most elements are working okay. And I'm bringing this down like this. You can definitely see that there's areas that we need to fix, but that's okay. This is normal. But again, I'm going to go to skin, go to bind pose. Good, my goodness, that makes things so much easier. Now, just to be safe, and also since we haven't got too far, I'm going to turn on my control rig just to make sure that's still working. And I'm going to save this. Again, since I'm not too far, I can still keep this as skin 1. Okay, so again, now that the saving is done, I'm turning off my rig again so I have my bones. And I'm going to do probably the last simple, not necessarily easy, but simple part, because there's only really 3 things we need to skin at this point. One is the shirt, then is the arms, and the last part, which we're not even going to touch today, is the head. We actually want to save that for another lecture. But let's actually get the bones for this. So this is where it gets a little tricky because we really have to figure out what needs to move for these parts. Well, this is what we need to move for these. We definitely need the clavicle because, again, it basically affects here. So if you have, now if you're using a t-shirt, most likely you're going to also have to get the bicep as well. But since my character has a muscle shirt, I don't really need to get that part. So, but again, if you do have a t-shirt, you can select these areas first. Now, just to make sure I don't move anything, I'm hitting Q. There we are. Selecting both these clavicles. Then I'm selecting the first spine, because that's going to be a factor here too. Going to select the spine after that. And again, you have to go in backwards order. If you try and select the very first one, these other joints are not going to be selected, and that will be a problem. Then select this joint over here, and then, as always, I'd select the actual hips as well. Now, since this does go a little bit beyond, which is basically what we want, this is actually a pretty good selection as is. So once again, I'm going to select the actual shirt, hit apply. Because again, I've already have all my settings done, and no area here is going to, from what I could see, is going to be controlled by more than 2 joints. So got kind of lucky in that one. But I am going to hit apply. And just as a little safety precaution, I'm just going to rotate that a little bit, and oh, take a look at that. That's looking mostly good. You can definitely see that there's some areas we're going to need to fix a little bit. Selecting my shirt, go to skin, go to bind pose, bam. It's always good to double check that. And it's always fun to say bam every so often. Okay, now this next part is where it gets tough because we really have to decide what joints we need. So I'm going to select the arms first. So I'm going to select the hand, hit F. And in this case, I'm going to select not the tips, because I don't nearly need the tips in this case, but I do need this bone over here, this bone over here, and this bone over here. This is basically all the joints for the thumbs. Same thing for the hand. Again, don't need the last joint, but I do need this one, and this one. Oop. I need this one, and this one, and it has to be done in that order. This one, and this one, because we're using the selected joints. This one, and this one. And now that I have all my fingers, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 15 joints are selected at that point. That is kind of crazy that it actually took less joints for my spine than it did the actual hand. But if you get into more complex rigs, that might change. But I'm selecting my hand, selecting my arm, selecting my bicep, and of course selecting the clavicle. Now I'm debating whether or not I want to select anything else. Now if you have short sleeves, you don't need to go quite as far as I have. Probably just getting to the bicep will be enough. I have a little bit of a tank top, so I definitely need to go that far. And then rinse and repeat on the other side. This is again where it gets tricky. But again, with some patience. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, 17, 18, and 19. Now again, we might need to add in an extra joint later. For example, the areas that kind of go inside of here, we might need to actually skin that to our spine. But again, it's not really necessary now, so unless it proves otherwise, I would just go that far. Then I would select the actual skin itself, and then again, I don't need to change any of my settings, thank goodness. So I'm just going to hit apply, and I'm just going to do a quick little test. So that's working okay. The fingers are the areas that are going to be the biggest pains in the butt. I'm not going to lie there. The first joint usually moves pretty well. It's just usually the second that needs some adjustments. Well, actually, it looks like looks like I lucked out there. So it's always a good thing when things go according to plan. Okay, so again, to put that in the exact same spot before, I'm going to bind pose. Love it when that happens. And yeah, don't worry too much about doing the head yet. In fact, don't do the head yet, as what's going to happen, we're going to be making controllers specifically for the head. So going any further with this right now would not be in our best interest. So I can close this. Last thing I would do before going to the next step is we are going to go to skin, going to paint skin weights. And the big thing that I usually recommend first-timers to do, now that that tool's there, this helps out a lot, is check to make sure that you have all your bones. Because sometimes when you skin, you might not have everything. So in this case, I needed this toe, the foot, and the leg, and I got all three. But as you can see, there definitely needs to be some adjustments. Ooh, especially over here. But that's okay, we still have time for that. Okay, so no major problems that I could see with that. So going to the leg. Okay, so what we had here is we had the hips, which are no problem. We have the upper leg, the lower leg, the upper leg, then the lower leg. Again, we didn't really have too much of a need for this at this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually try and work with it without adding that extra joint for now. But if I do need it later, we can always add it in with little problem. So I'm going to the shirt over here. Once again, seeing what I have. So I got my hips, because I definitely needed that. I got my first spine, my second, my third, and I got both my shoulders. So that's awesome. Now the final one. This is where things usually get a little strange. So be prepared, because, well, basically sometimes things get weird. Okay, so left shoulder, left arm, forearm, hand. Okay, I got my, let's see, I got my index finger, 2, 3. Middle finger, 2, 3. Pinky finger, 2, 3. Ring finger, 2, 3. Oop, went a little too far there. Thumb, 2, 3. And yeah, that looks like it's all set. Cool. Now let's hope that the other side gets the same treatment. So the shoulder, the arm, the forearm, the hand, and fingers crossed. So index, 1, 2, 3. The hand, 1, 2, 3. The pinky, 1, 2, 3. And the ring, 1, 2, 3. And the thumb, 1, 2, 3. And lo and behold, looks like everything went pretty well. But again, it's always good to double check just to make sure there's no shenanigans going on and so on. Again, the only shenanigans that I saw was the fact that this joint didn't get selected. I'm going to be honest, I might not need it. Because again, the way that the shirt kind of goes down over here, I might not need that extra joint. It's one of those few times where maybe I was a little overly cautious. And again, I could check with the hair, although that's going to just be one thing of red. Or in this case, white. But that's okay. Again, anything that's white has full 100% control. Anything that's black has no control whatsoever. You have to be careful with adding, again, anything with pure black or pure white, because it will have some strange reactions to that sometimes. But in this case, we're actually pretty good. So I'm going to end the video right here. So this is going to be one of my smaller videos, thank goodness. And I would like to actually start skinning the boot. And if we have time, I would actually like to try and get the hips in the next video. But we'll probably end the video series right around there. Apparently, that's my little alarm there. so that, again, we have a place to get started, because just trying to do the legs themselves is going to take a little bit of time, so it's definitely worth doing this slowly. Before I go any further, I'm going to put on my control rig, make sure everything's still working. It is, so that's awesome. And yeah, so I'm going to save this up. And again, since we're going to the next step, not only am I going to save this, but I'm going to save this as a new file just to be safe. Remember back when I was doing grad work, I actually had almost 100 files with the character I was working with at that time. I don't think you guys are going to have to go quite that far, though. And gals, of course. Okay, so let's wrap things up, and the next video we'll do some minor skinning, and then we'll probably end it there, because I've thrown a lot of stuff at you for one day. I want to make sure that I can give you a chance to breathe a little bit. So, all right, I'll see you on the next one momentarily.